And you're very welcome back to another bonus episode of the Leitrim GAA Podcast going out over this Christmas period. And joining me to chat a little bit about himself, his time in the Leitrim jersey, moving down under, and of course what the 50-mile challenge means to him and those around him in New South Wales and Sydney, is former Leitrim player and four-time Senior Football Championship winner with Allen Gaels, Donnacha Lynch. Donnacha, you're very, very welcome to the programme.
Hello, Breffney. How are you?
I'm great. More importantly, I'm sitting chatting to you here in the depths of winter. But luckily for you, it's summer where you are.
It is summer. Look, we're enjoying the sunshine at the moment. We have had a lot of rain. You won't believe this, Breffney. Particularly over the last year here in Sydney, there's been still heavily involved in the Gaelic games here, and there's been probably more games cancelled in Sydney than I ever had playing for Allen Gaels back in the 90s. But we're enjoying the weather here at the moment. We've had probably 8 or 9 weeks of clear blue skies, so making the most of it. I know you're having a pretty cold spell at home at the moment.
Yeah, everyone who's looking out nervously now doing the 50-mile challenge over the next couple of weeks is looking out nervously going, I really don't want to be outside in that. Whereas you're thinking, happy days, I'm going to get out in the sunshine and get a nice walk around, whether it's Sydney Harbour or the Opera House or that neck of the woods, the Harbour Bridge. I'm sure it'll be a nice spin for whoever is going to be joining you on those particular walks. But first, let's rewind a couple of years. You mentioned the 90s. Talk to us about growing up in Drumshanbo. And the expectation that I suppose on a son of a Kerry native to kind of come in and be the all singing, all dancing member of the football team. How was teenage years kind of growing up in Drumshanbo back in the 80s, 90s?
Oh, look, I look back at those years now and, blessed to be, grown up with a generation of, we were lucky a generation of players came through, back, I guess, around mid-80s, late 80s, turned into intermediate champions in 89, first senior champions in 1991, and I broke through. We won a minor championship in 1994, and a lot of that team actually that won the minor championship in 94 broke onto the team that won the double in 96. I think it was league and championship, and then we backed the championship up with another win in 97. 1 or 2 years, dormant years, and then won another 2 championships in a row. So it was definitely a golden year for Allen Gaels during the 90s and into the early noughties. I do still look back at those and keep in contact with a lot of the lads, and a lot of that team are all across the globe now. And it's probably one of the reasons why Allen Gaels may not be as strong as maybe some of the other teams in Leitrim, because a lot of the kids are unfortunately playing for other clubs across the globe. You look at Gareth McQueenie, he's got a couple of sons that played for Meath Miners that won in All Ireland, and Gareth would have been one of the mainstays of that Allen Gaels team, that was on midfield for 5 of the championship wins.
Absolutely. You don't even go that far to find players that Allen Gaels have lost. Look to Auckland Sheelan. There's a couple of Cullens on that team as well. I'm sure Allen Gaels would love to have. But of course, that is set in stone. The Auckland Sheelan boys aren't letting them go at this stage. Talk to us about breaking into the Leitrim team and what it was like at that time, kind of as you got a little bit older into your early 20s and all of a sudden you find yourself in that Leitrim jersey. How did that come about?
Yeah, I look at them. From under 16, I was obviously playing with Allen Gaels, and I was lucky to get called into the under 16 setup. And a lot of the players that I met for the first time at 16 years of age or 15 years of age, Colin Regan, Garrett Phelan, Shane McGettigan, Lord of Mercy on him, all these players I progressed through the years to play with, into minor, into under 21, and then made my breakthrough with the seniors in the late 90s, and that team actually was the last team that got to a Connacht Final in 2000. I was back home in July of this year, and there's a photo of the squad still up in the office at home. I think my dad put it up back in 2000, and I was looking through the team, and we had an incredibly strong team. and I remember we ran Galway to, we ran them to 7 or 8 points that day. I know it sounds like a good beating, but that was an exceptional Galway team. And, at the turn of that century, the Leitrim teams were really punching above their weight. They were very strong. So I had a couple of good years there. Don in the green and gold jersey. Very proud couple of years representing the county.
Of course, that Galway team you mentioned won All Ireland in '98 and in 2001. So it was right in that spell of, I remember that full forward line of Savage, Joyce and Finnegan were terrorised many a defence across the country at the time. So a huge achievement at the time, as you mentioned. And of course, the last Connacht final we've got to. Speaking of that, I'm sure you're familiar with the draw this year. Let's talk a little bit of football for a second. We have a nice little opportunity maybe to get to a Connacht final, at least on paper. We're in half of the draw that has London, New York and Sligo and ourselves in it. All 4 counties will probably be looking at that going, there's a Connacht final in this for us. Can we get there?
Look, there's been significant improvement, and I've been keeping a very close eye on how Leitrim have done, particularly in the National Football League there over the last 2-3 years. So, I don't think there's an awful lot between Sligo, Leitrim. On our day, we'll definitely put it up to them. Be very hopeful that we'll get through, particularly against London. So there's a very good chance that we could get a Connacht final this year. You look at the development of the team, particularly last year under the new management. Some fantastic performances. You've seen a lot of fellas come through from Sean O'Heston's that won the championship. St. Mary's now that won the championship there recently as well. I watched that online. I was really impressed with some of the players that are coming through, and I'm sure there'll be some further new additions to the squad for the upcoming season, which will make us that bit stronger. I know we'll probably be impacted with some lads departing. I know here in Sydney and in Perth and Melbourne, there's been a bit influx of Gaelic footballers from all over Ireland. So hopefully Leitrim won't be impacted that much by immigration.
Yeah, you mentioned Sydney and you mentioned kind of the New South Wales football championships. You've been involved over there yourself. I know I saw photos of you on social media earlier in the year with a fairly nice, I think it was New South Wales championship that your club won. What's it like? What's the Gaelic Games environment like over there?
Yeah, I've been involved ever since I moved to Sydney in 2017. I put on the jersey for a couple of years, struggled around the pitch for maybe a year and a half, 2 years, finally tying up the boots, but got into management with Clann Gael here 3 years ago. And, I've been privileged because I actually have been involved with a Roscommon man. There's been a Roscommon Leitrim connection in joint management. Seamus Gallagher from Boyle, the two of us have been working together, managing Clann Gael, and we lost a final in 2000 in the championship here in Sydney. There's 7 senior football teams in Sydney. Lost that final by a point. Won the league the following year. Disrupted year because of COVID. And then this year, 2022, finally broke the duck. Had never won a senior championship. First time in our history. Finally brought it home. So been a very successful year. The standard, particularly, just before COVID, the standard was incredibly high. Even when I played here, I played B football. I didn't play A football in 2017, but, the majority of the teams would have, probably 12, 10, 11, 12 former inter-county players playing. So standard very, very high. Probably dropped off a little bit during COVID because of, very few people coming into the country. But over the past number of months, Breffney, there's been a huge influx of players. Just being in the WhatsApp chat for Clann Gael there, I see there's been an incredible amount of new players being added to the squad. The season starts late January, as in, the pre-season starts. The first round of the league starts probably end of February, but there's already been some social outings, over the last couple of weeks, and you can see huge amounts of Irish. Hopefully we'll get, we'll have another good season next year.
You have to remind me, there was other Leitrim involvement with that particular club this year. Michael McQueenie, I think,
Right.
from St Mary's comes to mind. There was one or two others possibly as well.
Yeah, Nevin O'Donnell as well. Well, he's played for Leitrim and he's played for Cavan, but we've had a good Leitrim connection with Clann Gael, and myself and Michael have been involved there for the last 3 years, and Michael subsequently was captain of the New South Wales team, which we won the state championships there a couple of weeks ago, here in Victoria. So Michael he's gathered a good few medals, particularly over the last 3 years here in Sydney. So he's been a huge loss, obviously, for the county team back home.
Absolutely. Sorry, absolutely. Yeah, no, Gaelic Park in Melbourne, just outside Melbourne, is a fairly good destination for a bit of crack as well as a good bit of sport over the years for many Irish and Leitrim people, of course. Talk to us about the 50-mile challenge, Donnacha, because obviously it's something that allows you to kind of keep that connection with home. What does it mean to you to be involved in the 50-mile challenge year on year?
Yeah, I think I might just go back to when I first immigrated. If somebody had told me 11, 12 years ago that I would have been living in Australia, I would have said they were mad. But because of the economic recession back, in 2009, 2010, it became a necessity to immigrate. And, one of the toughest parts of living the far side of the world is, the time difference, being so far away from home and family and friends in Leitrim in particular and in Dublin. So when a challenge like this comes about, it's a fantastic way to stay connected. And I'm not a great man for Facebook, but particularly in January, I'd be on it I'd be on it every day. My auntie Maureen up in Mohill is a great woman for social media. She's a great Leitrim supporter, a great Mohill supporter. So there's always a bit of banter on the messenger on Facebook. So I do find January into February, the connectiveness with my friends in Leitrim, the fellow participants, seeing the money they're raising, seeing the steps they're doing, seeing the banter going on, it's a great motivator. And I'm a big believer in social connectivity, no matter if it's going for a walk or going out to meet some friends or making new friends. So I find that's one of the big things for me. And obviously I'm a proud Leitrim man. I do try and wear the Leitrim top out as much as I can here around San Susie. It's a very NRL rugby league part of the world where I am. So there's not too many Gaelic football jerseys around San Susie.
Yeah, I was actually just going to ask you that, kind of what part of the city you actually live in, because there's so many lovely spots that people can kind of go and spend time around in Sydney. And we talked about some of the major destinations, the Harbour Bridge, the Opera House, which are right beside each other, of course. But in terms of the routes that you'll go for a walk in, do you take in any of those spots? Do you kind of treat yourself every now and again to go and hit some of the highlights?
It's mad. I've been living in the city, I'm 18 kilometers from the city, but we don't spend an awful lot of time in the CBD. It's usually when somebody comes down to visit, or a friend comes from interstate, or a work colleague comes into town, that you'd end up going into the city, and you don't get bored looking at the Harbour Bridge, or you don't get bored looking at the Opera House. So you still are in, when you do go in there, and you do see these tourist destinations. There's a lot I haven't done. There's a lot we haven't done. We live very close to the national park here, and it's a bit of a hidden gem, a massive national park, and that's got a lot of trails, beautiful scenery. It's got a 40-kilometer coast, which is spectacular. So there's a lot to do. It's a great city for outdoor living. Great city if you're into sports, into hiking, into cycling, running, walking. So spoiled for choice. Particularly when it comes to walking in January.
Yeah, no, I'm reasonably familiar with the area. I spent a little bit of time on two wheels, just passing through it one day around Botany Bay. There, it's a nice part of the world, and it's right on your doorstep there, Botany Bay, of course, familiar to many from the fields of Athenry, but I suppose it's on your doorstep, so it's not quite a novelty for you when you see it on a daily or a weekly basis. Donnacha, what, I suppose, just to finish up, if you're looking back at the last 2 years, could you pick out one highlight for us, maybe of being involved? It might be an interaction you had with somebody physically or online, or just something that happened on a walk that maybe sticks in your mind and is kind of that little bit of motivation to go, yeah, I'm definitely doing that again next year.
Yeah, look, there's been a couple of occasions, where I went with friends locally here, and they haven't been from Leitrim. I went walking with some of my Australian friends here. I went walking with a couple of other county friends as well. So, I mentioned earlier on there, Breffney, about connectivity, and being so far away from home, it's important to get out and actually, you don't have to be from Leitrim, and here I went for walks with some of my friends. Great opportunity to get to know them better, build relationships, give them an insight into where I'm from as well, because people are interested. Oh, what are you doing this for? So there's been a couple of occasions there over the last 2 years where, I've rang a couple of friends locally and they've got involved in it as well. They may not have got involved in the fundraising, but they've, donated towards, my fundraising page. That's probably been the biggest highlight. I probably built some good, strong relationships locally here, even though we've been here for a couple of years. You'd have a set few friends, but you're always out there chatting to people. I think Leitrim people are the friendliest people in the world. So it's in our blood to reach out and chat to people, and I'm no different, I don't think,
Absolutely. Well, listen, that's a lovely place to end it today. Thank you so much for giving us your time, for staying up past your bedtime as well to have a chat with us because of the time difference. And it's been a pleasure catching up with you, Donnacha. The very best of luck to you in the challenge over the next few weeks.
Thanks very much, Breffney. All the best.